Hey, blessed ascension tide to you. That's a word that needs to be brought back into our regular lexicon. Ascension tide, right? That's one tide I'd like to see roll. That's a little southern joke there. UGA people do not cheer for the roll tide in general. Hey, good morning. That's me being silly. This is my backyard. You can see, let's see, where is it? Right back there. See, we're doing a little bit of excavating back there. That's we. Yeah, my family did that. Uh, they took up the pavers, and you know what's going to go there? Chicken coop. Yep, that's right. We've been wanting chickens. I've been wanting chickens forever, and we're finally in a place and a time where it makes sense. So that's where the chickens are going right now. They're upstairs, and you might even be able to hear them. So that's right. Right now we have 10 birds in our house. 4 that live there and 6 that are getting ready to move outside that are chickens that are going to give us some eggs and some entertainment, because there's nothing like chickens for giving you entertainment. If you don't know what I'm talking about, YouTube it. I guarantee you there are chicken videos, just probably a million of them, chicken videos, and I bet you my kids have watched probably most of them, and if I let them they'll start making them soon, so they'll have their own bird channel thing, right? So that's what's going on back there. In my world, it's Monday morning. We had a nice celebration yesterday in Anderson at Christ the Savior, and we're still limited to 10 lay people, uh, but that looks like it might be loosened up a little bit. You may have heard that in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the USA, um, we've talked about this last week, but priests worked with their parish boards to come up with plans for reopening in a safe way, what that would look like, and the bishops have been meeting with them on Zoom to discuss that and just to get caught up. That was the best part of that meeting, was just getting caught up. And so this past Sunday in Waynesville, North Carolina, at Holy Resurrection Mission, the Typico, we were allowed to have 20 people. That's what the space allows with social distancing, and we had it all mapped out because you had to. It's a small space. We had to figure out, and then we have overflow in the outside, so we could fill up the whole parking lot, right? So I guess as long as North Carolina is open, we could say we have unlimited seating. But it's hard to hear, so maybe we'll put some speakers out once we grow beyond 100 or so. Yeah, Monday morning. So that's a glorious thing. And then this Sunday, I'll get to be back up there with them. And we'll celebrate Pentecost. We'll do our kneeling vespers together after the service as well. It'll be an awesome time. So some changes on the show coming up. You may have noticed we've gone from 5 shows a week, which I started once, I saw a need. Pandemic was getting serious. So did, a show every weekday morning. And then I had to get a job. And so that took out Thursdays and Fridays. So we went to 3 days a week. Well, school starts next week. And I'm still going to be working. So next week we'll do 2. And then the next week we'll go to 1. And I'm going to have fun with them. I don't know if you're really sad, if you're crying right now, it's going to be okay. It'll be all right. There are other YouTube shows you can watch. And if you really like hearing my voice, I've got, I don't know how many, over 200 episodes of Orthoanalytica up. And back in the day, I used to do a long format where I did a series on UFOs, I did a series on ghosts, and so false advertisements for stuff. I made up stuff. So did you know that there's a Ukrainian Orthodox community somewhere deep in Appalachia? Yeah. Well, on Orthoanalytica there was, and we'd go check in with them every once in a while. Some fun stories came out of that. Also, Good Guys Wear Black. We're not quite to 100 yet there, but I'll keep throwing content up there. My next plan for Good Guys Wear Black is to go to St. John Chrysostom and to read his commentaries on the letters of St. Paul to Timothy, right? because they're vocational. And St. John Chrysostom, he was just an eminent pastor, and he understood the human heart and what it takes to lead. And so we're gonna dive into that, and I'm just gonna read it. I'm not even gonna translate it, So I'm gonna use that 19th century English translation that's in open domain. And so you'll get to hear, like whatever it is, Victorian English in a Southern accent, and that's just awesome for entertainment value. Come on, I mean that's got to get us, 1 million subscribers. No. So there are other things that you can listen to if you want. And like I said, I'll keep doing this, and I do plan on doing things like, hey, let's do a show on UFOs. Let's do a show on aliens. Let's do a show on ghosts. It's going to be a lot of fun. Because, and you may have noticed, some people, this drives them crazy. I smile a lot. So some people, I have been criticized for not taking things seriously enough. Yeah, okay. Well, if you want people who take themselves too seriously, there are other podcasts and there are other YouTube shows. I get enough of that in my real life. I'm not going to push it off on anybody else. Because if I think I can't laugh at myself and I can't, just laugh at the world, I'm not going to make it. So even if it's dark humor, that's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, we've got a show that was rescheduled. We're going to have the iconographer Lynette Hull come in. She's a prosopon iconographer, very traditional, and she's fantastic. You're going to fall in love with her. All of us do. And we're going to talk about, worship. We're going to talk about iconography. We're going to talk about the difference between folk styles and classical styles. And it's going to be a lot of fun. You'll see. You'll see. And then on Wednesday, we're bringing back Father Gregory Jensen. He has a PhD in spiritual formation, and he's trained kind of as a social scientist. So, he's got a lot of different skill sets that he brings to any conversation, and he's he's an experienced priest. And I reckon we're gonna talk about the stuff that's going on. And that's what we're going to do today as well. But we're going to come at it a little different way today. Today we're blessed to have Father Samuel Siemens on with us. You'll remember, popular episode when we had him on before. And today we're going to draw on his experience with the police. 34 years. I think I got that number right. And we're going to talk about police culture and what it is and what it isn't. And we'll see where it goes from there. We're also going to talk about some exciting things that are going on in Mountain Home, Arkansas, with Father Samuel. It's just a blessing to have him in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the USA, and look forward to seeing all the wonderful evangelization that goes on there in Mountain Home. Okay, but before we meet Father Samuel there in Arkansas, we've got to get in the right place for it. And so let's do our deep breathing in Jesus' prayer. And we need that. We need that because images, they really affect our ability to harmonize and to have peace. And you may say, well, it shouldn't. These images should disturb us. Okay, fine. But we need to be able to act appropriately according to peace and objectivity, not according to the first thing that our cortisol stress reactions throw into our brains. Okay? So we need to move away from that cortisol, stress, shallow breathing, stressed out place that the media loves for us to be, because that's where it makes its money. And we're going to go into the place of peace where good things happen. Okay? So let's say the Jesus prayer together. All right. You can breathe in as we say the first half, and then as we say the second half, you can breathe out. Okay? Ready? Breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me. a sinner. Pause. Breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Last time. Breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Okay, there we go. Oh man, thanks for that. I needed that. I appreciate y'all doing that with me. I'm in a better place now. I'm in a much better place. And let's see what kind of place our brother, Father Samuel, is in. There he is.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey,
Oh, it's great
how's it
to
going?
see you. Christ is in our midst.
He is and ever shall be. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's good to be with you again.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
real blessing. It's a real blessing. I appreciate our brotherhood, and I appreciate you taking the time. Oh, we've got one of our listeners or watchers or whatever just checked in, Bobby, and he's got some police experience as well, and so I know he's going to be interested in this. Um,
Yeah.
so tough times, right? And the goal
Yeah.
of this podcast is to have, basically the format is two friends talking about things they love, right? And I don't want to move away from that, right? I don't want
Right.
this to turn into some kind of, let's talk about the problems of the world, right? People get enough of that, right? So, but there is joy. There is a lot of joy, and that's what I want people to hear us talking about. That yes, we're in the midst of a difficult time, but we're going to be okay, and we're going to be okay
Yeah.
because of these things that
Right.
humanity and America, people's hearts that they're based on, right? So we're going to get there, but first, I'm so excited about what's going on there in Mountain Home. Tell us about it.
So am I. So am I. Yeah. As you know, I was received into the Ukrainian Orthodox Church USA by His Eminence Metropolitan Antony, and His Eminence Archbishop Daniel. And I love their evangelical zeal. It's very refreshing, and so we're just excited. We've been looking at. We're starting with anywhere from 17 to 20 folks who are all Orthodox, and we're now looking for a place to worship. Got to have a good lead on a place, and I'm just praying that that works out because it's a really nice place. And so I haven't had to do the report like you guys have had to do as far as uh, to get a blessing for services because we're not to that point yet.
Yeah.
But I hope to be at that point soon. So
Yeah, I hope so too, because there's so much work to be done. Uh,
ton of it, a
there's
ton of it.
so much to be done.
And it's not just about like I told Vladika, it's not just about the 17 to 20 souls here, but there are other people here searching and looking who have had experiences with other parts of Christianity that just didn't feed them, and so they're asking questions, and now I'll have a place to say, look,
Right.
uh, come see what it's about.
Yeah, and even in the South, so people, the South in any kind of, so as a social scientist, there's always a dummy variable, a control variable for the South, because there are so many things that are different about it. When you talk about religion, when you talk about race relations, you always have to put in the South because there are some things that are unique that'll steal the statistical leverage from other variables. Anyways,
Right.
but
Yeah.
even in the South, we've got a whole generation and a half that are adults that are basically unchurched. There are a
Right.
lot of people there are a lot of those nuns, NONES, right?
Yeah.
And they're facing, along with the rest of us, all of us, we're facing these huge, existential, the Wieczne Вопросы is how the Russians say. These eternal
Right.
questions are right now in our face. So they were there before. What happens when I die? What is love real? All this kind of stuff, right? But now
Yeah.
we've got this. It's right here in our face. Hey,
Yeah.
we've got problems of life and death, and we've got problems of relations. And this is Christ came because he saw our
Right.
distress about these things, right? And
Yeah.
and so the message of the gospel is this is not God's plan for us. and I know you're going to be
Right.
preaching it. You're going to be living it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and that's another thing. The nuns that you're talking about, maybe some of the younger millennials, um, they don't even know the biblical stories that we took for granted in our generation. So I was born in 1967. So, and I realized that a few years ago when I used this metaphor. I said, "Yeah, it's split like the Red Sea." And this 14-year-old girl looks at me and she says, "The Red Sea? Did the Red Sea split?" And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." Oh man, because it just didn't. I mean, it was not on her radar. She never heard that story,
Oh, yeah.
and so that's where a lot of them are. They just, even the older folks who have rejected Christianity, let's say, at least knew those stories, those
Yeah.
narratives. But we can't take that for granted now.
Right, and we take so much for granted. Even with the people that are in our pews, we use words that we haven't explained. And you can't assume people know Christ. Okay, people use the word all the time.
Yeah,
What is his last name? I wonder if you ask that. What was Jesus' last name? Well, Christ. You had
right.
Joseph and Mary Christ, and then you had Jesus Christ.
Right.
No,
Oh,
but
man.
there are so many concepts, and they mean a lot to us, right? And we know the backstories and all this, and it resonates. But for them, it's just a
Yeah.
word, right?
And one thing for me, Father, that really, really, really bothers me, but it's also a motivator, is for a lot of these young people or younger people or even middle-aged people, whatever, who have rejected God, rejected Christ. They have rejected a version of God and of Jesus Christ that doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people say, "Well, explain to me what you think. What's God like?" And then I hear them and I say, "I don't believe in that God either."
Right.
And so, no part of God's mad at you. You've accepted a narrative that wasn't even accurate and rejected the whole thing because of that one thing that you were told, or that one version of the story that you were told. And it's really a shame. And so, a lot of people don't want, a Christianity like that. And the problem is that's not real Christianity when you get right down to it. So,
Yeah, that's one of
we have to
those.
do a correcting as well.
That's one of those great conversational moves, right? Because once you have that, it could go into argumentative mode, just.
Yeah.
And instead, what you get is this, you just say, well, and then you gain an ally. Say, oh man, I'd hate that too, and then you
Yeah.
give back what they said. Yeah, that would be a terrible God. The God that I know, He's the one who came to fix that. You know what we
Right.
call that version of God? We call Him the devil, right? This is the
Just
false.
capricious, angry, vindictive, punitive. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Right. That's one of those those judo conversational moves, right? You bring the energy, but it's not
Yeah.
instead of we're not sparring with them, right? We're
Right. No.
developing connections, and that's a great thing to do. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and Mountain Home, we know there are going to be a lot of good things going on there. So how big is Mountain Home?
Mountain Home is roughly about. I've heard people say, well, the sign says, 13,000 or 15,000. Some days there's that many people at Walmart. So I know it's much larger, because we're like the county seat,
Oh,
we
okay.
we have the regional hospital here, Baxter Regional Hospital. It has over 1,700 employees alone.
Mm.
And then we have Baxter Laboratory is here. So in the daytime, I've heard there can be upwards of 50,000 people in the city limits of Mountain Home, with all of the, because just about everyone that lives out in Baxter County comes into the city limits of Mountain Home to work and to earn their living.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to draw from here, and it's always nice too, as you know, any Orthodox priest or pastor will tell you, it's always nice when you get those ready-made converts that move to your town. They're already Orthodox and they're looking for a church, and they show up and they already know the whole deal. Like you just you can welcome them in. They know the liturgy. But we can't depend on that to grow the church. It's not about pew swapping or anything like that. It's about true evangelization.
Yeah.
And getting that light to turn on in individuals' minds when you discuss these things of faith. And so I love it when someone says, yeah, I tried to be a Christian and it just didn't work out for me. And so the lead-in question is, okay, how did you try that? Tell me about it, you know? And once again, a lot of times you find out the way they tried and what they were taught is not the truth at all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then, yeah. So I was talking with David Murphy last week about the role of personal testimony. You know, this is another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just comes up in normal conversation. You know, well, what are you struggling with? You know, they'll say, you know, they'll give their struggle and say, man, I had a similar struggle, and wow, here's what Christ has done for me. You know, and it's very natural because that's why we're here. You know, it's not just because we like wearing robes and crosses, right? You know, it's because Christ has changed our lives. He's made my life worth living.
My wife will tell you, if I could get away doing this in shorts and a t-shirt, I would. So it's not about this for sure. But you know, it's one of the reasons, Father Anthony, that I created a Facebook group for Orthodox Christians who suffer from anxiety and depression, because I learned that many of those folks were rejecting themselves because of the struggles they had. And so they said, well, I can't be a good Christian or a good Orthodox Christian because, you know, I have chronic anxiety or I have depression. There are some days I can barely get out of bed. And I would ask them, so you feel yourself rejected because of what? What are you saying? That the church and even God himself is not wide enough to accept you and your experience and to help you work on yourself? And so I've seen the light bulb go on a lot of people who have joined our. It's, believe it or not, we now have in that group, and I ask 3 questions. I ask every person who wants to be a member to answer 3 questions, because there are evangelical Protestant anxiety and depression sites. This is specifically for Orthodox Christians, and you know, my goal and desire was that they be fed from the scriptures, the Holy Fathers, venerable teachers, extant and those from times past who have reposed, elders that have actually led people through those dark times. And so, believe it or not, we now have over 1,200 Orthodox Christians in that Facebook group. So there's a lot of work to be done in a lot of areas, and I'm just excited to be here to watch. I even know it's very exciting for me because folks have confided in me as the moderator of the group and as a priest with private messages that they were suicidal, and they found our group and they began to, you know, they said, I didn't know that an elder talked about depression. I thought my anxiety and or depression was a lack of faith. And so I was despondent and in despair. And then I find out there are these words for things that I've experienced. Acedia, holy cow, who knew that existed? And that lots had been written on it. So
right, yeah, it's this idea that you run into, you know, that the church is for a certain set of people, right? And so, you know, I know people when they're struggling with something, they'll disappear for a while, and you're like, oh man. How can I foster a culture where people know that when they're hurting, this is the place to heal, right? Where they don't need to come back when they've dealt with their stuff, right? No, we're really here to help you deal with your stuff. That's the message.
Every priest knows that conversation. Every priest knows that conversation. Father, I wasn't at Divine Liturgy because I messed up this past weekend. I relapsed. You know, I used drugs, or I was depressed and I drank too much and I felt dirty and I didn't want to be with all those holy people.
Yeah.
And as a priest, you're like, no, that's when you should be there. That's what I want to talk to you. Come, you know, this is when you're sick, you go to the hospital. I mean, this is where it's at. It's the hospital for sinners, right? It's not a court of law. I'm not going to judge you. I want you to come and be there and come in and have confession and talk to the priest about those things. Yeah. And hear those hymns sung and partake of those mysteries. That's when you really need it. That's the well don't need a physician, as someone once said. So
I've heard this.
yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, well, God
Anyway,
bless you
we want to
for
get on.
letting people know that they belong and that Christ did come for them, and the place to experience Christ in the fullness is in the church, right?
Yeah,
That's what it's for.
exactly.
So, yeah, thank God.
Exactly.
Thank God. Yeah, so, one of the things that is causing us a lot of stress right now,
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm gonna contextualize this, and I may drive some people away. If you walk around this world with open eyes, you can't live for very long without having your heart broke.
Right.
That's why every second I have to give my life to Christ. Because if I love, someone's pain is my pain, right? And there's a whole lot of pain. There's a whole lot of hurt and not enough hope. And and it's sometimes we can pretend, if we have enough Netflix or whatever, that the only pain in the world is, oh no, I've binge watched all my favorite shows, right? And then something shows up on your screen and you're like, this world, I don't like it, right? That should not be, that cannot be. I cannot live with this. How can that happen? And the experience, if we're living well, the experience is our experience too. And to see someone killed over time when it was clearly happening, and it was done by someone who has the authority, our authority, vested in him. He was doing that on behalf of me and you. No, this cannot be.
It's so we're the absolute. My background, as you know, is in law enforcement. I did bivocational ministry for most of my adult life, and I have to say that and I watched the entire 9-minute video of Mr. Floyd's murder. Let's just call it what it is. And I've seen a lot of police training videos. Most of the police training videos I've seen in police training have been of police officers making mistakes, tactical mistakes, and of police officers dying, being shot, stabbed, run over, all kinds of fatal encounters, because the law enforcement community learns from the mistakes that police officer might have made. And so I've seen, I say all that to say I can honestly say thousands of police videos, and I stay current with them. Just been a habit I've had for the last 20 years or so. And I have to say, without a doubt, that was the most difficult to watch video of a police encounter that I've ever seen. It was so hard to watch. I found myself screaming at my own computer, get off his neck. There was even a firefighter who identified herself, a Minneapolis firefighter, said, you're stopping that man's airway. You got to get off his neck. And he was just deaf to it. And it just made me so angry. And I guess that's part of the surprise of all this to me, because I thought, this was one video where there's really no doubt. Yes, other videos have now come out. I saw one this morning where it appears that the officers were struggling with Mr. Floyd inside the police car. How he got out onto the concrete handcuffed face down, I don't know. I haven't seen that. But none of what I saw comported with any of the police training I've ever been given. You don't restrain a handcuffed man face down by putting your knee on his neck. You just don't do that. And so part of the surprise in all this was, for me, is I thought, oh my gosh, after watching the video, the entire world is going to be in agreement on this particular incident. And the police chief there in Minneapolis, who I believe is African American. Those guys were fired. Not only the man who did the killing, but I think 3 other officers that were there. They were fired, I think, the next day, and then 2 or 3 days after that, Officer Chauvin, where I'm from in Louisiana, we'd say Chauvin, but he was charged with manslaughter, with homicide. And so I thought, okay, thank God the system worked. Everything was done right. That guy, they were immediately terminated. That officer was terminated. He was charged with a crime, and yet there's still this explosive riots that have been happening and looting and
right. Well, let's get to that in a minute. I want to talk about, because I want to understand police culture, right? So you talked about, you've seen thousands of videos, and a lot of them were in mandatory training. I have no doubt.
Right. Yeah.
And so this is going to be part of the way that the police itself. Who will watch the watchers? Well, we do.
Right.
And so this is going to be another video. Look, you cannot restrain someone like this, ever.
Right.
And if we see you doing it, you're gone.
You're gone.
And there's a whole list of things. That it's not the first person who couldn't breathe because they were restrained improperly.
Right.
What is police culture like? So one of the things that we're watching, we're like, hey, he wasn't there by himself. There were 5. Why didn't one of those other police officers say, hey, get off his neck?
Right.
Get off his neck. Is it one of those, is it the kind of culture where, it's to challenge somebody in public, a fellow police officer in public, is to somehow demean them or undermine their authority? What's going on there? What's the psychology?
Right. Or make them look like they don't know what they're doing. You as a priest at the altar, how would you like to be reprimanded by another priest that's celebrating with you? Would you like that? Do you think that would make you, it would embarrass you? It would humiliate you?
Right, exactly. So here's the point.
Okay.
Is, yes, I have been corrected in the altar, and I know what my instinct is. It's to self-justify, and they know that, so they would be less willing to correct me, right? But we have built into our culture, supposedly, is the idea of humility.
Yeah.
So even though my first reaction is to say, don't correct me in the altar, I'm supposed to be better than that, right?
We've all been corrected in the altar, especially with a bishop serving, but have you been corrected in the altar loud enough for all of the laity in the nave to hear? So that's what's going on, because you got all of this took place in public, and so you have these 3 other officers on the scene, and everyone there is shouting and screaming. So now I'm just telling you what police culture is. So now you have what's called a perimeter issue. You've got all of these people showing up, and they are a threat to you, because you don't know if they're armed, you don't know what their intentions are, you don't know if they're going to attack the officer that is restraining the suspect who's handcuffed on the ground. So there's this hypersensitivity. It's what puts so many cops in the grave early. It's this hyper focus, hypersensitivity. Your head's always on a swivel. You can't relax. You cannot afford to relax. Even the smallest town police officer cannot afford to let his guard down and just act like he's just going to church. It'll get you killed. And so all that's going on at the same time. And so part of the police culture is, it's not received well to call a guy out in public in front of because it makes you look like you don't know what you're doing. And I wonder if that was part of this dynamic, because there was of course I don't know the names of the other officers. There was an Asian police officer that was right there, and I'm shouting at this Asian police officer like, what are you doing? Look, can you not see? He has ceased to breathe. What are you doing? At the same time, this officer's dealing with people on the sidewalks that are screaming at him, and it's just a recipe for disaster. And I hope and pray that there's going to be some better training come out of this.
Right.
But that's just a small piece of the puzzle. The culture, and not only the police culture, but the wider
Right.
society and how they react to the police.
Yeah.
And you may be in a sector or a part of an urban area where you are the enemy simply by wearing a badge. Full stop.
Yeah, and
You're the bad guy.
And so, Father, I don't want people to hear you say, "And that's okay." This kind of culture of not correcting people when they're at fault in public.
No,
We're not saying that. We're just
Absolutely.
describing the psychological dynamic, and some of our psychology works
Right.
against our salvation, right? I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're not defending; we're explaining. And so that psychology, there has to be a mechanism, a ritualized mechanism.
Yeah.
For working around that, for overcoming that, whether it's
Yeah.
the lean in, because one of those police officers could have leaned in and said, "Get off his neck,"
Yeah.
right?
Get off his neck.
Nobody
Yeah.
knows what's being said, right?
Right.
Okay, but it wasn't done. So I don't know if it takes role playing. Do they do role playing in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They do. But I want to zero in on something that you've touched on. To even discuss this issue from a police culture point of view is risky, because you run the risk that people, he's defending the cops. And so they don't hear, and that's why I was so saddened by the violent response, because I'm like, now none of the people that could learn something from this, the police culture, society at large, so many people now are not going to learn a valuable lesson from this, because the battle lines are drawn. When I show up on a call, and I have before, showed up on a domestic disturbance, and the man walks out of the front door with a baseball bat, guess what? We're not going to have a conversation. I can't hear a word he's saying. Until he drops that bat and I'm safe, and he's no longer in danger of having force used against him, there is no conversation. So I'm hearing this thing on the internet, Facebook, that rioting and looting and street violence is the language of the unheard. Well, it's an unintelligible language. You might as well speak in tongues, because when you take it to that level, people are not going to hear you. They're just not going to. A man with a gun in his hand walking up to you, that is not a conversation point. What do the police do? They revert to their training, drop the gun, drop the weapon. They don't want to talk about anything else until that threat is over. And so, man, I wished I had the answers, Father. I really,
Yeah.
it's a tough.
Well, but you do have some answers that'll be useful, because we can get to riots, and I study social movements and stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, I get the rioting part of it. What I don't know from the inside is police culture. I kind of know a little bit military culture, but I was never a trigger puller, right? And that's a
Right,
pretty
right.
tight group of people who go through
Yeah.
danger every day together. So the only insight we have is like watching shows like Blue Bloods or something, right? And that's Hollywood. It's Hollywood. So, how are police officers selected? This is another. So, in order to get in a lot of jobs, you have to match a certain kind of psychological profile. They're going to try and weed out people who are going in it for the wrong reasons, like the priesthood, right?
Yes.
And there's a discernment process.
Yes.
What does that look like for the police?
So now it's gotten a lot tougher than it used to be. Gone are the days where the biggest, baddest, toughest guy in town, you just throw a badge and a gun and tell him, well, go keep the peace. So there are screening processes. But here's the deal. It's not, there's no nationalized standard for this. Just like among jurisdictions, some jurisdictions require priests to go through a psychological examination, and some don't. And so these standards vary, not only state to state, but town to town, city to city. You can incorporate a city in just about any state and start your own police department. Well, what are the standards? What are the standards that the city sets for itself? And as long as it's in compliance with state law. So yes, you would apply for the job, and then part of that is the interview. There's an extensive background check. So we're going to make sure you're not a felon. We're going to make sure that you don't have violent misdemeanors. If you've had a domestic violence conviction, you can't even own a weapon, so you can't be a police officer, period. That's the end of it. Some departments that are more, I guess, progressive or forward-thinking will do personality testing. We've talked about Myers-Briggs before. but it depends on just how far they want to go with it. And so if you're not a felon and you pass the background check and you fit the acceptable limits of a psychological profile, then you can go on and be hired by a municipality or a state police or whatever, and then you'll be sent to police academy, where procedure will just be drilled into you.
So
for
I want to let's go to the training part in a second. So my view is you can save yourself a lot of trouble later on if you set the filter right. Of people who are coming in.
Right.
One of the things that and it's supply and demand is also a problem. And you hear about how hard it is to get the kind of people you want to apply, right? Because it's not a great paying job. It's continual stress, So if you get an idealist who comes in, they're going to burn out. If you get somebody who's a hard charger, you don't know if that might go sideways. So it's tough. It's tough to set that filter right.
Right.
Which one do you think would be better? Is it better to err on the side of not having enough police officers, but having ones that you've invested in because you can trust them, or is it better to say, look, we're gonna protect against the terrible misfires, but we've got to open up the filter because we need bodies.
Yeah, I once heard a police trainer say, to get the best cops, you're going to have to start training them and paying them like they're registered nurses or even some physicians. That old saying, you get what you pay for. So if standards are, if money is low and standards are low, the filter's set pretty wide, isn't it? And it allows some personalities to get through that shouldn't. And listen, every police officer, and I'm sure that eventually maybe other police officers, career police officers, retired police officers may watch this video, and I can hear the voices now. They will tell you that every one of us, every police officer has worked with a difficult coworker, like that guy who is he's on a trip. He doesn't break the law. He doesn't mistreat people. He doesn't abuse people, but law enforcement to him or her is this. It's a power trip, and those are the cops that give police work writ large a very bad review. And so getting rid of those people sometimes is much more difficult because they're not rule breakers, but they just like the authority of a badge. So it's a very difficult setting that filter, like you're talking about, is. It's needful, but I think it's also very, very difficult because at the end of the day, you have to pick from the applicants that apply. Yeah. And guess what? Recently there haven't been, like for example, we were in a similar social situation with the Ferguson situation, and then the resulting Ferguson riots. And so people started noticing, number one, depolicing, and number two, a lack of qualified applicants, because people smart enough to be a police officer are saying, I don't think so. I'm going to go be a CPA or, or could do construction or something. Be a nurse. They don't want.
And not just because of the risk, and not just because of the low pay, but because of the prestige.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't want to deal with a lot of, I remember the first day of police academy for me, 1986. That's telling my age a little bit. The instructor got up there. It was the first class, first day in police academy. He had a badge in his hand. He said, I want to tell you all something before we get started. And I'm going to tell you right now. Be decided upon this thing. And he held his badge up, he said. A great many people in society are going to automatically hate you because you're wearing this. So if that bothers you, you need to go do something else. Because as soon as you get out of that car, there's a segment of society, and we've seen that segment grow, that are automatically going to prejudge you as being whatever it is they think bad cops are. And so if you're thin, if your skin is not thick, he told us, hit the road, go fill out an application at Mickey D's or something, because this is not going to work for you. And that's held true over the years. And so
I want to hear about training in a second, but I got a kind of a policy sort of question. What? So I'm inclined to believe that we have more laws than we probably need.
yeah, right.
Does that have, if we had fewer, but clearer laws, would that have an effect on personnel need for police? Would there be a requirement for fewer police? Or is it just kind of, there's a general level of things that police have to take care of, whether it's called a law or not?
Right. I think it's the latter. Yeah, I don't think the fewer laws would, nor did I think that would even be possible in our society today. I mean, we all have states who have legislators who make laws. That's their job every year. And there's always more and more and more and more. And by the way, the attorneys and the police officers are expected to know more and more and more as these laws change and are modified. So, but there's also, the need for, reminds me that, was it the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Like you can't do anything. You're not worried about maybe getting dinner tonight if there's a guy with a spear standing right in front of you. Like, that's not on your mind at that moment. So unless you can be safe, all these other needs really don't matter. And so I think there's always going to be a need for police officers. I wonder what's going to happen later with applicants, especially with, what's going on in our country right now. Our talented young people. I mean, I have a 14-year-old son, soon to be 15, and he's like, Dad, I think I would like to be a police officer. And before I could even think about it, Father, I said, oh no, please don't do that, son. But do it's dangerous. Do something else. Be an attorney. And I earned my living that way for most of my adult life, and I didn't want him to do it. So
all right, so let's look at training now, and both the initial training and the ongoing training, and maybe some OJT. What goes on with that? Is there a mentoring process? What's the accountability process? How do you weed people out who are underperforming?
Right. So you all police. So we've gone through the filter, right? You're hired. So you're sent to a police academy that varies by state. Sometimes it's 18 weeks, 22 weeks. When I first got into law enforcement in 1986, it was an 8-week police academy. And that's grown and grown because the laws have grown, policies have grown, training, the tools that we use have multiplied in number, non-lethal weapons that are used, and that all requires training. So those training periods get longer and longer and longer because there's so much more to learn. So you go through that, and you go through firearms training. And so if you can't perform, and there's weekly testing, at least there was when I was in academy, and I think it's still that way. And if you wash out at a certain point, you're done. If you wash out on learning the statutes, or you wash out on physical fitness, or you wash out on there have been police officers that have done great through academy and can't qualify with their firearm, and have gone on to do other things because they just couldn't put the rounds in the target where they needed to be. So, and then after that, you are put with an FTO, field training officer, and that varies by law enforcement agency, municipality or state. So that could be, you might be with an FTO for 6 weeks, could be 2 months, because when you graduate from police academy, you are certified as a law enforcement officer in the state, but that doesn't mean you know how to do your job. I mean, it's residency, right? That's what, doctors, they don't just say, okay, you finished med school now, bye, doctor. They have to go through residency and be trained. Same thing with nurses and many other vocations and professions. So during that time, you've got an experienced field training officer that is not only training you, but is grading you and observing you. And if there are any problems that he or she sees, then there can be some red flags raised. And there have been police officers who have been hired, so they made it through the filter, they made it through academy, got 3 or 4 weeks into their field training, and they wash out because I've seen people wash out because of fear. The first armed encounter or potentially armed encounter, or the first time they were threatened with physical violence, they just, I've seen that actually. People say, no, this is it. I'm done. This is not for me. I was scared to death. Well, yeah, you're scared to death. Police officers that have been 25 years, 30-year veterans are scared, but you have to be able to check that fear and make good decisions and press forward. So there's a lot of areas where a recruit can wash out, as we say, and not make it to the end where he or she is a police officer in their own police unit on duty. So it's a whole lot goes into it.
So what about continuing
And it's very
ed?
expensive.
Yeah, right. What's an investment? What
Yeah,
about continuing
right.
education, and not just education, but continual application of the filter, right?
Yeah.
Because that's one
Yeah.
of the things that people are saying is this guy, there were red flags all over the place. There should have been a system that recognized that and reassigned him, got him out. He should be doing something
Yeah.
else.
I haven't. I hope one day it's made public. I'd like to read his jacket, but sometimes those are kept. Their personnel files are kept personal. I'd like to see what he got a pass on. I've heard that there were up to 17 incidents, but you got to be careful with that, because you can have an incident and it be, no wrongdoing on your part at
Gotcha.
all. It's a citizen
Gotcha.
that just didn't like the way you looked,
Gotcha.
and so they file a formal complaint and so on and so forth. But I'd like to see what he passed on.
See, and I
That-
appreciate that. See, we have to look at the 2x2 box. Anytime you've got a target, it's easy. It might be easy to say, oh, there were these clear warnings, but those same warnings may have been present in a good officer's history. That's what I hear you
Yeah.
saying, right? So
It's
you
quite
have to be
possible.
very careful. But so how is it that someone who should not be a police officer, how can that be identified mid-career? How does that happen?
Usually by a preponderance of evidence.
Okay.
Usually when there are enough incidents where bad judgment was used and the officer made a decision that he or she should not have made, and every well-trained police officer, even from 1 or 2 years on the job up, should have known better. So there are certain things that will immediately get you terminated. Use of excessive force, if it's reported, if everything works. I mean, listen, I have been in a situation. I was a lieutenant when I retired, and I've been in a situation where I chased a man on foot through like 6 backyards. He had broken into a house and he was fleeing me. So I'm going over chain link fences. This has been a little bit ago, so maybe I was in better shape. So I'm clearing fences and I'm going after this guy, and a couple of patrol units converge and block him off, and he's give out. I mean, he is tired, and well, so am I. So I was just basically the dog chasing him until the hunters at the front could get him stopped. And a young officer who was pumped, full of adrenaline, after I had the guy handcuffed, he comes up and grabs the guy by his shirt, and I grabbed his arm and I said, "Oh, hey, you need to check that adrenaline, my friend.
Yeah.
I know you're all worked up. I know you want to help me, but it's over." And see, that's what a lot of people don't understand. And this is not making an excuse for anybody. But when you get into a confrontation, a chase, a fight, something like that, your body, all of these chemicals, you start to get tunnel vision. I mean, I've had it happen. I've had to draw my weapon before on a guy that wanted to commit suicide by cop, and he was trying to get to a rifle. And if it wouldn't have been for his brother, I may have had to shoot that man. And, I thank God for his brother every day, because I've never had to shoot anybody. But you immediately get tunnel vision, and your mouth gets dry, and your heart rate is up. And so society looks at these videos and they say, "Oh, the handcuffs are on. That should all stop." It doesn't work like that. The human body, like, you have to, I call it deramping. I've seen officers sit there after a critical incident was over, and they're just shaking because all of this adrenaline burning off,
Right.
and they're just, their breathing is out of control, and it's just like, "Hey man, you gotta."
Yeah. So, but a healthy system will ritualize that. It will create
Yeah.
it'll create systems to protect people from that.
Right.
Because you have it as
It
soldiers
should.
too. You have to. So this repetition and then moving people in and out and stuff. You've got to have a system that protects against that, or else you get terrible outcomes. But yeah.
Yeah.
So this adrenaline response, it's huge. I mean, the tunnel vision, the everything comes up. It's and well, anyways. So
Yeah.
this is some.
Well, and all I'm saying too, and a lot of times that is all filtered through about 2 minutes on one of these.
Yeah.
And people look at that and go, well, he should have done that. She shouldn't have done. Now, things are very clear, like what happened to Mr. Floyd. I mean, there's no argument about that.
So
But there are other
so
instances where,
there's a dynamic though. So a second team can come in and kind of leapfrog in, right? Is that part of the deal
Yeah.
where you have?
if they're available,
Yeah, okay.
I mean, sometimes there's barely enough guys to cover the calls you have.
So here I'm gonna
mean-
yeah. So that's great. I think you've explained that very well. So you have some people that maybe aren't quite fit, and they can fake it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but then you get under adrenaline, the wrong set of circumstances, and that comes out, and boom,
Yeah.
somebody's life is ended. There's
Yeah.
there's murder. Is there a psychologist assigned to police units?
Depends on where you are. There's not one necessarily assigned, a psychologist assigned to a police unit. Some departments will offer counseling,
But don't require
to
it.
police officers. But here's the deal with that: the officer has to feel safe, because now the officer's going to be like, okay, so now I got a shrink grade me. It wasn't bad enough what happened to me, but now I've got this shrink that's going to grade me, and so is my job on the line if I don't check out well or perform well with this doctor? So now what's up? What am I gonna?
Yes.
What does this mean? And so most officers will say, no, thank you, I'm fine.
Yeah,
If
so-
it's not manageable.
So I wonder if, yeah, and that's because you have responsive evaluation, right?
Yeah.
You had an incident, so you have to get cleared by the psychologist. What
Right.
about like having a regular? No, this is just part of your routine. You go and you talk to the, maybe it used to be done by a chaplain, right? But
That would be wonderful, Father.
yeah,
But it costs money.
Right.
Officers would have to. I can almost tell you would have to be mandated. Look, you have to go see the department shrink. Forgive me for using shrink.
No, it's
The psychologist at least once every quarter, just to check in.
yeah, you just make it part of that routine, and it could be just, one of those things that people check the box in, right? I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm just trying
Right.
to, because
Yeah.
yeah. The yearly evaluations, what do those look like? I assume that you have performance evals.
Oh yeah. They're usually done by your supervisor, and it's just grading you on your response to calls, your interaction with the public. Those don't really. Those evaluations are just usually about, like you would think, like a corporation. Is the salesman? How many contacts is he making? Is he selling the products that we're offering? Blah blah. It's more like business as usual stuff. Those evaluations really don't figure in so much with weeding out people that shouldn't be police officers. It's usually critical incidents or failures in performance, things like that end up getting a police officer, in the sights of administration. Also, there's another thing here that we haven't even mentioned, that's a very big part of all of this, and it's politics. Who's over the chief of police? It's a mayor. It's a mayor, an elected official. Who hires the police chief? Police chiefs in some places are elected, and in some places, chiefs of police are appointed. So now you have a chief of police that's appointed by an elected politician. So what does that mean? And if you've got, what if somebody on the police force is related to somebody on the city council? You ever think of that? So it can become, this thing is way more complicated than a lot of people
Yeah. Okay.
realize, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So,
So
right, we've seen these terrible images, right? And so what that does to our mind is we overestimate that's how police are, and that's what police do. I want you to describe to me what a kind of a normal day or a normal week looks like for a police officer. Is it mostly spent jumping chain link fences? Is it mostly
No.
spent trying to, help neighbors work through something, help couples work through something? What does it look like?
Right. Not nine. 90. I would say almost none of police work is anything like Hollywood. Maybe 2-3% is on the exciting stuff, chases, all that stuff. Most of the time, you know what you're doing? You're knocking on the door, sir. Your dog's been barking for the last 2 hours. Would you please shut that dog up so that your neighbor can get some sleep? Or it's spent on domestic disputes. People that have been fighting for the last 20 years at the same address, same old, so every police officer in every community, you can mention a name and they'll police officers say, oh yeah, he's on 801 Locust Street. I've been there. Or, it's the ones that you go to over and over. It's running traffic. It's traffic stops, speeders, red light runners, stop sign runners. It's sometimes doing civil process paperwork where you're delivering, civil service to somebody. A lot of times it's called standing by to assure the peace. You got a newly divorced couple. They're doing the child exchange. It's in the parking lot at the police department. You stand there to make sure that you just keep the peace. You just stand there to make sure. That's the kind of mundane, over and over and over things that police officers do. And like any other vocation, like any other profession, it becomes a regular job. The new wears off really quickly. And 2 or 3 years in, guess what, man? You're just going to work. That's what you're doing.
So, Father, you're a joyful man. You're an extrovert and you're a joyful man. How does that happen? Is that just some kind of weird genetic defect in you that, or is this something that the culture encourages?
I would have to say a lot of it is my faith. My faith in Christ and the inbuilt, what's in my heart by virtue of the Holy Spirit, to treat people fairly and to love people. Sometimes when people aren't nice to me, and to try to understand the other. That's the big thing that we haven't talked about because we don't have enough time. But people talking past each other, and I've seen it here this week, especially online, where this person says, African Americans are more likely to be killed by police than white people. And then this person over here, you don't know what you're talking about. Last year, the police shot 131 people, and only 28 of them were African Americans. Okay, in the first 3 months of this year. Well, that's a statistical fact. More white people were shot and killed by police than black people. On the other hand, when you go per 100,000 and you look at it statistically that way, then there could be a systemic problem to be looked at. And so I'm watching these people, and they're not even speaking the same language. And then you have people Caucasians in the white community that feel like, man, I'm always being judged just for being white, and I'm only 20 years old. I didn't have anything to do with that 60 years ago or 70 years ago. And why are these people hating on me? And nobody's connecting. They're all just shooting past one another. And we've got to figure out a way to address that where we can sit down and actually hear each other, actually listen to what each other is saying.
Yeah, two things are working against us, and it's two institutions that have a built-in bias against that have a built-in bias for division, and that's our news media, who makes buck on sensationalizing and dividing.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned it before when Hunter was on. This movie Hoaxed that Cernovich puts out. It starts out and you're like, yeah, this is just your normal media bias thing. Yeah, okay, yeah, the media hates conservatives. Got it, blah, blah, blah. And then about halfway in, he goes, that's what I'm talking about. Watch this. Nothing up my sleeves. Let me introduce you to Black Lives Matter. Right? And then you hear the representatives of Black Lives Matter explaining themselves, not through a media filter.
Yeah.
Not through a conservative media filter and not through a liberal media filter. Both of those have incentives to create an image for Black Lives Matter that is unpalatable for the other, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, no, man, if people knew this, we'd all say, yeah, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, because this is America. Yeah, right. But that's not what we hear. So the media has this built-in. We got to divide people so we can make money, and then
And
social
if you dare
media.
say all lives matter, then you're against the cause of what I'm saying, and
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, and we can say both.
yeah,
So it's crazy.
exactly.
So-
exactly. And then let me tell you from police culture, there are all these statistics flying around, about, for example, and I don't know what the number was in 2019. African Americans shot by police. But then I hear a police officer over here say, "Oh, I wonder if anybody knows that last year 135 of us were killed. Police officers, black police officers, Asian police officers, white police officers." So they feel like on that side, nobody cares about us. Nobody's hearing us. There's this systemic racism that they don't want to talk about, and we're just victims in this whole conversation. And so we just want to go do our jobs and go home and be left alone. And that's where you run into the dynamic of what's called depolicing. And that's problematic. So you got officers that won't do their jobs because they're like, I don't want any problems. I just want my retirement. I want my pension. So I'm going to show up, take my calls, but I'm not going to initiate any police violator contacts because I don't want to take a risk to myself. So it's
Yeah,
It's,
and we're not going to solve it right now, but we do.
No.
So if you want to hear my solution to it, just go to OrthoAnalytica and listen to my homily from yesterday, right? Because
I'm going to do that.
that's, and I'm not just telling you don't. But this, the solution is the solution, right? And
Yeah.
it's not one size fit all. There are no policy prescriptions built into this. That's not what I was selling.
No.
I was preaching Christ crucified. And
Absolutely.
That's the job, right?
Right.
But it's amazing how we can take anything that has the possibility for doing God's will in this world, that we all be one as He is one, to listen to one another, to understand, and you'll have that glimmer of hope, and then boom, like social media. The promise was, hey, look, it's going to bring us all together. We're going to be able to. And then boom, within 5 years, nope.
yeah.
This just polarizes us more and more and more and more and more. Now, after 3 months of nothing but that, and the angst, of being stuck away from our normal routines, and then, like you described, everyone who saw that image of that man being murdered was united against that act. Everyone. I don't care what their color was. I don't care what their party was. Nobody can see that and say, yeah, I'm all right with that.
I've not heard one. I'm friends with hundreds of cops, Facebook,
Nobody's okay with
locally
it.
here. I have not heard one police officer say.
So we have this moment. We have this moment. We are all, this has brought us back together, right? And boom, because of the way it's portrayed in media, and then social media follows along, next thing you know, we can't stand each other again. It's another reason why I hate the other.
Yeah.
And this is this state of mankind outside Christ, as we're divided into nations, into tribes, and the answer really is, like you said, we've got to listen to each other. We've got to lead with love, not and we got to the police. What I want people to hear, I want them to see your heart. You are not an abnormal. You're not an abnormal person. You came out of 34 years of police service, and you love people. You're called to service. The same thing that led you into the priesthood also sustained you every day as a police officer. Talk about that for a second, and about how common that is among your brother and sister officers.
Yeah, that is very common. You always, people in our time, people love to throw around statistics, 99% of that, or, the vast majority of police officers that I've worked with, the vast majority of police officers that I know, and of several races, are, at the end of the day, they're good people with good hearts. They want to do their jobs. They want to serve their communities. And when something like I saw a meme the other day that said, "No one hates a bad cop more than good cops," and that's really true. And something else that struck me when I was watching this particular video with Mr. Floyd, So the officer kneeling on his neck was white. The cover officer right next to him was Asian. There was a what looked like an African American police officer there, and maybe a Middle Eastern guy. And I was like, you know, yes, racism exists and it's a problem, and we've got to learn to talk about that. But this whole dynamic right here shows that this is not just a white versus black problem. That there are some things in systems that have been set up for law enforcement that have to be addressed. And if you don't admit that, then once again, what do? We retreat to our respective camps, right? And we lob missiles at each other. And so that's why my hope and my prayer is that, the violence and looting and burning and pillaging can be stopped and people can start listening to each other, because most police officers that I know, to speak to your question, don't hate people of different colors or backgrounds. Most of them are good people. And they're doing a job now that's very difficult in a climate that makes it even more difficult. And so, I feel for the younger officers now, because, how then do they proceed? Do they do their job? Do they not do their job? Do they just step back, depolice? What is it that society wants from them? And it's a tall order.
Yeah, and it should be one of those valence issues, right? One of these universal issues. Hey, look, we've got a problem here, and then the president could come on and unify us all around police reform, right?
Right.
But there's even if he's an honest actor, right?
Yeah,
it's so
right.
politicized that if he comes out and he says, look, we're providing federal money for, body cams and they're mandatory now, or whatever the reform is, higher pay, better training, psychological input, whatever it is, even if everyone agrees objectively, yeah, that's a great idea. If one representative of a tribe or another puts it out there, odds are it's oh, it's sad. And the answer is Christ. Yeah. So let's keep.
That's the only answer. That's where we are. That's one of the things that I read some years ago, Martin Luther King Jr.'s biography, and a lot of it had his own writings and his own literature. And he understood something. He understood that you can't change things with a bat in your hand. That that love has to. This man gave his life. And he refused. There were people pressuring Martin Luther King. Look, brother, we got to start fighting. We got to take up arms. And he would, he had this discussion with Malcolm X. He said, no, that's not the way. Gandhi had it figured out, at least on this score. And so, if a man's threatening you, you can't hear a word. He can't hear a word you're saying. Yeah. And that's because of love. And
one of those. They're pivotal. I'm not into the great leader theory, right, of history, right? But there are these pivotal individuals, and some of them were our founders, and then he's one of them. Because America could be a very different place right now. And, it could have gone south.
It's like in the Old Testament, you have these redemptive deliverers that show up and right the ship, And I think he was definitely one of those people.
Right, right.
And my prayer is that at the end of all this, or the beginning, that love will win the day somehow.
Yeah. Well, and as the old camp song says, let it begin with me.
Yeah,
right? I have to give my life to Christ.
Are so polarized, they're even afraid to talk about it. I was talking to a police officer this morning. I was like, I've got to run to the house. I'm doing this show. What's it about? And I told him, he's like, oh my gosh, man, better you than me. No way. He's like, nothing you can say is going to be right. It's a shame that you think that, that we can't even talk about it.
Right. And we can, because we have charity towards one another's intentions. So even if we disagreed, one, I'm not going to disagree with you publicly in this, we have that kind of a culture. I'm not going to set you up for that. But also, when we do, I have charity towards your intentions. You have charity towards my intentions.
Yeah, of course.
And that's something that we can bring back into our culture, but it has to start with us.
Yeah, right? Because I believe that you mean well by me.
Right. And
I mean well by you.
And that's that's the job. It's easier because we have so much in common, right? But our
Yeah.
goal is even to bring that kind of love to our relation with our enemies.
Yeah. Right.
And maybe that was easier a month ago than
Maybe
it is
so.
today.
Yeah.
Well, God's given us a perfect opportunity to learn how to really love and not just be lazy.
Yeah. And we got to try, and it's going to take work.
It is.
It's not going to be easy at all.
Yeah. And you know, we do it in the way that we model our relations with our, you know, with ourselves, with our families, our friends, and our parishes and our communities, right? Until I'm modeling love and understanding and act and listening within those and sacrificial service
Yeah.
within those, I've really got no leg to stand on to
Right.
complain about anything else because I'm not doing my job.
Right.
So, all right. Well, brother, I appreciate you staying a little long today. I know we could talk about this for well, I mean, forever. This is a huge problem, and
Well, maybe we can talk some more later on a later date.
I look forward to it. And I really do look forward to lifetime. Hey, when were you born in '67?
July.
July. Okay, so you're the old man in this friendship
I
because I was born in
yes.
November of '67.
I am your elder.
You are my elder.
That's the only time I'll be called an elder.
Well, and you have a little bit more gray too, so you know, obviously.
Thank you for that. That was
wiser.
great. Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody, I appreciate you joining us for this. We know that we haven't done any of the topics justice, but that wasn't the point. We're not solving problems. If you got nothing else out of it, no, you know, get the right thing out of it. That we can talk about these things if we are generous, and if we actually do it in love and understanding rather than bringing judgment into things. Right? There's a better way, and we know the better way. Right? That God so loved the world that he sent his son, his only begotten son, into the world. And that's where we are. And the world still groans in agony, but the answer's here. So keep that joy, keep that hope grounded in the knowledge that God's plan for unity for all mankind is not going to be thwarted, even by Facebook, by the media, by rioting, by police violence. These things are not going to stop the manifestation of God's will in this world, and it is our job to be that, right? Okay. Anyways, enough preaching, right? Like I said, if you want to hear that sermon, just go to OrthoAnalytica and listen to it yesterday. Tomorrow, we're going to have a great show with Lynette, so join us if you can. If you liked it, like it. If you liked it, subscribe it, share it with others. Until next time, Godspeed.